Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. We have a very special guest in store for today's show. Steve Johnson is an NHRA pro stock motorcycle driver who also started the Batman Scholarship, which is aimed at bringing more technicians into the industry. In this episode, we're going to dive into all kinds of things. Steve's racing career, along with what that Batman Scholarship is all about. Welcome to the show, Steve. How are you?
I'm fantastic, and we win and lose races by 10,000ths of a second. So I'm a detail guy, and you already started the show off with a detail. Do you know what that detail is?
What was my detail that I missed?
No, you actually did it really, really good. You're very maybe 1 in 100 times. You said that I'm a pro stock motorcycle driver, and a lot of people. Larry Dixon races a top fuel car, goes 340 miles an hour and 1,000 feet, but we try to say that we're not riders. You know, we think of a rider as somebody that hangs on to the back of somebody riding a motorcycle. You know, there's the driver in the front of the motorcycle, and then the person on the back is the rider. And it's like when you ride a pro stock motorcycle, it goes 0 to 60 in a second. It goes 160 miles an hour at half track, front wheels in the air, and the quarter of a mile it's going 200. And one of the rules is you have to be on the motorcycle when you cross the finish line. So there's a technique there. And if you're just a rider hanging on, you can ride a bull, but you have to drive a pro stock motorcycle.
I'm glad I didn't screw it up.
So congratulations.
Well, I do have to ask you about Larry Dixon because George Ahrens, our mutual friend that really kind of set all of this up. I grew up as a Larry Dixon fan, was always just a fan of drag racing in general, but your acquaintance with him, along with so many others, I just can't even fathom the amount of stories you probably have from over the years.
Yeah, that's Larry's definitely a best friend. I've got a unique. I'm really fortunate because I have quite a big handful of what I consider best friends. So Larry and George Ahrens are right there. So Larry, back when we were street racing, I have the greatest story where the helicopter. Larry's doing a burnout and he's racing on the street and there's 100 of us all zooming around. That's what we did when we were 20, and they took off down this street in an industrial area, and it's there's no side streets and stuff. And here comes a helicopter, and we're like, wow! And then the helicopter comes back the other way, and it's got Larry under its light, and we're like cheering, like you're going to jail and we're not. So I have a whole story that I embellished the living heck out of with Larry racing, but he makes a decision to either go to his house and hide and deal with his dad or deal with the cops, and he says it would be way better to deal with the cops. So we bailed him out, but we started street racing. I did motorcycles and he did cars, but back in the early days, that's just what we did. And finally, luckily, we didn't die, and we found professional racing. So we stayed in the same house, and he was winning races, and I wasn't. But we had Wallies, like in the background. If you're listening to this, you can visualize there's a Wally, and they're pretty hard to get, and it's in the background. I keep it at the top of my stairs. I keep it in my closet. I keep it everywhere. So. That's the Larry Dixon story, and we went from street racing kind of guys to turning it into a career. So and now he has a 2-seater, so you can get in his car and go 250 miles an hour at the eighth mile, and for only $11,000, I think. So it's a Larry Dixon commercial.
What an amazing story. Now going back to you've eclipsed some pretty major milestones lately. I think you had your, was it 500 starts in the NHRA?
Yeah. 500, going to 500 races. The motorcycles, it's a little more challenging because we started out at about 6 races a year. And then each year each few years they'd give us more races. So it went to 7 and 8 and 9. And, the cars have always gone to 23, 22. So they build up a lot quicker. But if you go to all the races on a motorcycle and you do it for 38 years, you can have 500 races too.
It's an incredible streak, though. I mean, to be able to do it with that longevity and not lose the love, and not only not lose the love, but your enthusiasm. You're more enthusiastic than anybody out there, right? Like you still have that love, you still have that burn, and it's incredible to me that you can sustain it for that long with the amount of energy that you have. And I mean, racing is not an easy thing, right? Like it's not easy in any aspect, but for you to just continually come back, be able to have some really nice success and still be as passionate about it as you were when you started out is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think that's how a marriage is supposed to work. Right? It's like, or in theory, a career. We try to engage young people from the standpoint of a career. You don't have to go to college to be successful. You can investigate skilled trades and have a successful career, raise a family, make money, and do all those kinds of things. And for, I guess, for me, motorcycles, dirt bikes with my dad, and then street bikes for saving money, going to the store with the pizza store, and then street racing, and then making a couple dollars, and then going to NHRA, being on TV, and and then having a platform to be able to talk about my initiative, my Batman scholarship, the things that are important to me about positive living and eating lots of broccoli. I'm a broccoli guy a little bit because I like having the pH in my blood and not stealing it out of my bones, to try to keep the pH balance. But, going through COVID, I learned a lot about health. And one of my lead technician, another best friend of mine, Irvin Allen, his name's Jock. He was on a ventilator for 22
Ooh.
days, and the likelihood to live after that long was less than 10%, but he did. He's young, he's strong, but those
Wow.
those are the things that I'm still excited about all these years later. So it really, luckily I don't rely on making money to make me happy. That's a tough road. I always told my mom, I'm gonna make my $1 million racing a motorcycle, and she said, well, you haven't won, and it's been 16 years. So do you want to do the box boy thing at Vaughn's, or, maybe construction, or, that's so.
So let's go back to the early days, because I do want to walk through that part of your career, and you'll, as the audience is listening, learn about why this Batman scholarship came along in the first place. But how did you start off in not only this industry but in racing? We know about the street racing. How does that street racing transition to some of the more formalized racing? Was it that you were having a full-time job while you were racing, or how did that work to get you to where you're at today?
Well, my first job was working at a horse ranch, stables, and my dad took me up there in his El Camino, and I still remember it. And every morning I'd feed the horses, and we'd come back, and the El Camino was fun for me. And I say that because on the weekends we would put our dirt bikes at El Camino, and we would go to El Mirage. We'd go dirt bike riding, and I loved that. It was fun. And so I think the transition started there with my dad, my brother Alan. We went dirt bike riding, and then from dirt bikes, I progressed and got faster dirt bikes. But then when I was 15 and a half, this is the real meat and potatoes of this story. At 15 and a half in California, you can drive a car with your mom with a learner's permit, but you can ride a motorcycle by yourself. if you have gas money, and it didn't take much back then to put gas in my Suzuki 90, and I taped on headlights and or a headlight. It was really not. It was really a flashlight, but it's you can ride that bike on the street legally with a learner's permit at 15 and a half. So I'd leave school, I'd go over to old girl's house or go riding around, and I had freedom, man. It was awesome. So that's, and then from that, it was like, hey, somebody's at the street light, and I'm gonna gas it. So I'm hot rodding a little bit on this. The bike was so slow, I floored it, and it still wouldn't go 35. But anyway, that's kind of where that all began. That was the transition, I guess, from dirt bikes to street bikes. And then I moved in with the Laronis, my buddy Jim Laronis, and they were street bike people, and I got a Honda 750, and then I sure as heck street raced that, and thought I was fast, and then Kawasaki, then Suzuki, and then we went to the track, and the track was a zillion miles away. So the street racing thing, and just lots of riding on the street. But all of a sudden, people were getting killed and dangerous and thrown in jail, and we discovered the drag strip, and it's like, wow, if this is fun, and I'm working on bikes in my little sport bikes business, little 1,000 square foot shop in Granada Hills. This was I guess it was North Hills, California, but it was I always saw the big guys racing pro stock in drag racing and just loved it. Went to the races, watched them, traveled a little bit, took a video camera, filmed all that stuff, actually sold footage, sold VHS tapes to the racers so they could look at their stuff. And that was, the early 80s. And then I had a buddy, Lauren, who helped me buy an engine and a motorcycle. Next thing you know, I was in 1987, I put this motorcycle in a crate and shipped it from Los Angeles to Englishtown, New Jersey for my very first NHRA Winston drag race, racing with Don Garlitz and Eddie Hill,
The legends.
Don
How
Perdome,
nervous were
Kenny
you?
Bernstein, Bob Glidden, Warren Johnson, Bruce Leal. I mean, I barely even knew these people. Connie Coletta, Shirley Muldowney. I mean, it was incredible. But, and I didn't plan on putting the motorcycle in a crate. I had somebody that was going to take me that was also racing. And then on Tuesday, they said they weren't going. So we scrambled. And then Craig Burns told me about building a crate, and we shipped it to ourselves in Englishtown, New Jersey. And while everybody was in the pits with their truck and trailers and motorhomes, and in those days, I had a 8-foot crate. And when we went home and came back on Saturday morning, they had put Sharpie marks around there, like it was my wheels on my crate. It's like, so we had an extension cord that hung out of there and some tools, but we were at the races, man. We were at the races racing NHRA Pro Stock.
That's insane. How nervous were you going into that? I mean, that I have to imagine is an intimidating thing when you're seeing all of these drag race icons at the track, and you're shipping your bike up in a crate, and you're alongside all of these people. Was it intimidating? Was it nerve-wracking? Was it walk me through that first race?
Well, I had been watching, and like I said, I videoed. So I had started to know these people a little bit. Terry Vance and George Bryce, Dave Schultz, Pizza John, all these famous people to me in motorcycle drag racing. They were right there, but I was just so happy to be there. Oh my God. All my friends came. We all spent our own money. I started on Delta in the 80s. I have 4.1 million miles on Delta. So I don't know of any of your listeners that fly a lot, but
That's a lot.
Between racing and doing my school appearances, and I used to do Walmarts with Slick 50 every Wednesday. So I got a lot of use out of Delta, but we all flew together, and there was no TSA back then, so it was just hooting and hollering the whole time. But to answer your question specifically, when you street race, clearly there's no rules, and I'm not endorsing it. Please understand, it's just part of my life, and I'm just trying to share. Luckily, I got smart, and I tell everybody, because kids are going to be kids, but at street racing, there's no rules. So all the people that are there, they're standing right next to you as you're doing your burnout. They're right next to you on the starting line when the guy's pointing and putting his hands up and then driving them. There's people all the way. There's everywhere. So as far as intimidated, I was way more intimidated when street racing was going on. But the NHRA, it's way more professional. So I guess thinking about it, I think I was a little bit nervous, but on the other hand, I don't think I was as intimidated as you might think. It was, I was just there having fun, man. I was just proud to be part of the fraternity.
I cannot imagine. And so how does it parlay into more NHRA events? Was it you go to that first race and then you start planning for the next race? How did it work? Was it something where you knew you were going to stick around, or was it one of those things where, hey, I'm going to piece this thing together as long as I can to keep riding?
Yeah, I was really, really fortunate because it is a family out there, so to speak. It's from marketing people to medical to promotions and market and public relations. The tuners, the technicians, the riders, the painters, the designers, the engineers. There's such a family. I got hooked up with a guy named John Asher, and when I quickly ran out of money to do this, back then it wasn't even heard of. We had a motorcycle. Everybody knows what a motorcycle is. Well, we put a Camaro tire on the back of our motorcycle, so it was a car tire, and this was like craziness, but that's what you needed to hook up the power, blah, blah, blah. So it was challenging to ride, but it was expensive. You had to buy tires and all these things. And, I didn't have a truck and trailer. The funny part of the story about going to Englishtown is we arrived in a crate. We got there and I literally never thought about how to get home. And then all of a sudden Sunday we lost, and it's like, how are we going to get home? Nobody ever brought it up. That's how we were, a bunch of knuckleheads, I guess. But we ended up coming home coming back to Bakersfield from Englishtown, New Jersey, in Blaine Johnson's trailer. So they put the bike literally in the stairs on the lounge in their tractor trailer. But it was, I think the transition and really understanding was when John Asher told me about sponsors, and he says, you don't get money and do business with friends, relatives, or your neighbors, or family, friends, relatives, or family. So I guess family and relatives is the same, but he taught me about sponsorship, and I had a little deal with Racer Supply, and get a couple $1,000 here and there. But my first deal with Slick 50 was a big deal. It started out very, very small, but it turned out to be a substantially. It's even back then it was $250,000 to run, at a high level. So it was, John helped me put that deal together. We had a relationship. That company started out with 10 people. It was multi-level sales, and then Jim Scott got in there and turned it around, and all of a sudden they're in Walmarts, and I'm loading up my motorcycle I'm loading up a spare motorcycle in a crate and sending it to Walmarts with a reaction timer. So we would uncrate it. We'd set it inside the store. It was right next to an end cap, a Slick 50. We'd talk about Slick 50. Starting your engine's a terrible thing to do. It treats the parts, not the oil. And I was part of corporate America. I mean, John Force was at Walmart while I was promoting castor oil, while I was there doing Slick 50. So I'm like, I've arrived, man. And I just thought the money that I was getting was millions of dollars. I just never really kind of glued it together. But yeah, John Force is here, and so am I. So I must be successful. So it was
your personality. I think your personality fit that so well in terms of, I feel like you have almost an entrepreneur's mindset going into racing, right? And I think that's where a lot of young racers can go wrong even today, where maybe not approaching they're not approaching it from that mentality, right? Of like, hey, you have to have the funds to be able to run and race. And that a lot of times is going to come from some type of corporate partnership or some type of sponsorship. And I feel like your personality is tailor made for those types of relationships, right? Like to have somebody that is energetic and passionate, and you can truly feel that it's not something fake. I feel like any company would just absolutely love that.
Yeah, it's back then in the 80s when John was teaching me, he had media reports and he was all about whatever you did. This is, again, way, way before computer, social media, all that stuff. So he was doing these reports. So if I'd go do a school appearance, which the school appearance, some little kid came up to me in Gainesville the first full year that I did it. And he asked me if I'd be a show and tell. And I'd lost in the first round. And I'm like, yeah, what's that about? And he's like, oh, you'll just come to my school with your motorcycle. And I'm like, okay. And I'm in Florida in a 14-foot box van that was white. It was pretty dirty. But that's I drove that from California there. And so then, this is going to sound crazy weird, but his mom came over and said, you're going to do this? And I'm like, yeah. And she said, where are you staying? And I said, well, I just stay in the van. And she said, well, you can stay at my house. So, I'm 20 something and I stay at this lady's house with her, and I go to do a show and tell with my motorcycle. So, I was all in. Not that I didn't know any better. I was just so happy. I was so proud. I wanted to tell the world that I was racing a pro stock motorcycle. And it turned out that this kid didn't have a dad. And so it all worked out good. But I was so happy when I left there that stayed with me. It stayed in my heart, my soul, my mind. And I felt like I was doing something. I talked to the kids. I didn't even have an initiative, but that really expanded. But wherever I was going with that story, I think that was the early days. And you really had to be all in and to show a sponsor that you could convey. A Slick 50 sent me to media school, and I learned a little bit about how to talk in an interview and kind of manipulate it around. So eventually, I have a mental advantage. Oh, what's that? Well, my engine has been treated with Slick 50 and I know the parts are protected. So I know I won't have a problem with my engine. So, you kind of manipulate the story around a little bit, but, I learned about the media and I'll give, you a question and your listeners a question. If you're listening to this and you're still engaged, you sit there and somebody hands you a contract. It could be for anything, but it's your livelihood to get paid, right? So somebody hands you a contract. And you take that contract back to your office, and whether you're planting trees or you're washing cars or you're racing a motorcycle or you're doing podcasts. I mean, what is the first thing Jay would do? What's the first thing you're thinking about from a business owner's standpoint?
Yeah.
You're sitting there, you've just got this contract signed. What's the first thing you're going to think of?
I can answer this how I'd answer it now, not 20 years ago, but the first thing I would do is give it to an attorney to look over.
Well, you're supposed to do that before they sign the contract.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh, so you're saying after you sign. So you signed.
You have an executed contract.
I misunderstood that part. I honestly don't know. I think a lot of times I've done several over the years, right? And I think when I look back at it, what I typically do is just get really nervous and then try to figure out how I'm going to execute everything. But I think so differently now than I did 20 years ago. I think if you would have asked me that 20 years ago, I'd say I'd go have a huge party and really blow it out, right?
Again, we're trying to engage your listeners, and I want to give my opinion. It's my perspective. That's my disclaimer. To Jay is this is obviously my opinion on all this stuff. But from a business standpoint, if y'all if y'all are looking there, and it doesn't even have to be a contract, it could be it could be shaking somebody's hand, it could be looking them in the eye and giving them your soul, your heart, your mind, everything. And that's where I was with this pro stock motorcycle racing team. And when they signed me a contract, the first thing I thought about is, how do I get them to re-sign this in the next 3 years?
Makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And I was
yeah.
fortunate that Kenny Bernstein was at the racetrack. I watched him in Winner's Circle. I watched him all the time. Some people like him, some people didn't. He was a businessman. He was so successful, and I wanted that. So, when you think about how do I get this contract signed again? Well, you have to perform, and it's not just on the racetrack. You have to show up for these appearances. You have to be dressed right. The bike has to be there. You have to be on time. You have to know your audience. How do I learn? I need somebody to help me do this stuff. It's like all of a sudden now this business thing's starting to turn. You have to hire people to get you have to hire a yellow freight, to get there, and you have to build this other motorcycle, and you have to do good at the racetrack. And then it's like, hey, how can I make an impression with these Walmart people? I met the president of Walmart in these things, and what do you think? What do you think was my most important tool in my entire business, my arsenal of racing? And that goes to people listening. What do you think is the most important tool a racing team had in the early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s for a racing team? The most important tool.
I would say maybe a marketing flyer of some type or something that was trying to sell the brand.
Not bad. A camera.
So content was even huge back then, right? Like you're trying to.
I love that we're on this road because it will help your listeners understand. I had a camera, and that is the way to not legitimize, to memorialize, so you can go back. Again, remember, how do I re-sign this contract? So you have to be able to show something that happened. And the media report had something on there. Did you interact with people? How many people were there? What time did you get there? What time did you leave? Was there TV there? Did you do an interview with radio? Blah, 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 all that stuff. And you were contact. So when you went in there at the end of the year, or if you were smart, you had a quarterly meeting to say how you were doing. You could go in there with this stack of paperwork that said, hey, I had pictures. So I would go to the local 1 hour place, and I would get 40 copies of one picture. I took, and you looked at the negatives. No, a lot of people's not going to know this stuff, but you took the negatives and you looked at them and you say, oh, I like this one. Well, I'd get them all printed one. And then I'd say, oh, I need 40 of number 6. I need 20 of this. And I'd send them to NHRA. I'd send them to the sponsor. And that way I constantly stayed in the media. I'd send it to all the media people that I got from Bernstein or from NHRA. There was a media book, and I'd send those pictures with a press release before every race in the mail.
Wow.
Sometimes 3 or 4 days before the race. I mean, I was doing that myself, plus trying to race. So all of that created a brand. We didn't even know what that word was back then. And as far as being excited, I was excited, but it was all about the business. It was all about surviving on a pro stock motorcycle. While Terry Vance and George Bryce had successful businesses making parts, I was buying my engines. But I was a marketing guy back then, and I just loved it. So the takeaway from all that is in racing, you win and lose, like I said, in 10,000ths of a second. But in anything that you're doing, there's a detail if you look far enough. And details matter. So peel the onion back at whatever you're doing. And when you peel it back far enough and you understand those details, it'll make you better than your competition when you really understand what those details are and how to make them better.
One thing and I love this part of the conversation because it is so intriguing to me to hear how much you had to do to get to where you are. But one thing I do want to point out about the NHRA in general, and I'm a racing geek of all sorts, right? I like all forms of racing, but rarely do the other series give you the access to see what the NHRA does in terms of tearing down an engine and really shining a light on the technical side of the business and of racing, and just the access from the broadcasts of showing off these highly talented people. I think the NHRA does it better than anybody else, right? They really, really give you all access.
Yeah, that's what our sport kind of stood on is a family sport. At the same time, there is no other access in all of sports like what you're going to get at the NHRA races. Where the series sponsor is Mission right now, Mission Foods. They make all the when you're eating a tortilla, and maybe even from Taco Bell, it's all made from Mission. And the guy's a huge car enthusiast, motorcycle enthusiast. But it's they do so good. They've got just an evolving leadership team. The sponsors can bring customers into the races and right there on the starting line, and great seats in the grandstands or in the VIP areas. And then when you're done watching them race, then you go back to the pit area and they're tearing the engines apart. They're changing new tires and transmissions and fixing bodies that have blown off. It's a fascinating sport. And there's manufacturers midway where you can see lots of technology. And of course there's funnel cakes there, so you can shove a funnel cake in your mouth, and and there's hamburgers too. But it's a lot. I'm a big proponent of NHRA and the Mission Food series. It's on Fox, so that's if you can't get to the race, there's nothing like listening to a Top Fuel funny car making 12,000 horsepower doing a burnout, and then going down the track. It's some thunderous power. But Pro Stock, my buddy Chris McGay races Pro Stock, and he's teaching me about engines. And so the 4 professional classes in the Mission Food series is Top Fuel, Funny Car, Pro Stock Car, and Pro Stock Motorcycle. And those are the ones that get the TV, and that gives me the platform to be able to run the initiatives that I have throughout the years. And it's always been about education. And
the Bureau of Labor Statistics says technicians make around $46,000 a year. Does that sound like BS to you? We thought so too. At WrenchWay, we work with some of the best shops and dealerships across the country, and we've seen technicians make a lot more than that. So we decided to gather our own data. We're excited to announce the launch of our new online technician pay tool. You can now search technician pay by industry, shop type, location, and experience. We've already had over 3,000 technicians submit their pay data anonymously. You can explore the pay data and even submit your own data anonymously at wrenchway.com/pay. Thank you for your continuous support of WrenchWay as we strive to promote and improve automotive and diesel careers. We couldn't do it without you. But what's the highest speed you've gotten to?
I think 20. I think we went 20. We might have went 202. I'm usually not the mile an hour guy. I'm known for just getting there quicker.
Yeah.
In our sports base, when they first went 200 miles an hour, that wasn't me. Hector Arana Jr. did it, but a lot of people were going 200 miles an hour, but I was getting there quicker. And I'm like, all the focus, all the TV is going over to the people going the mile an hour. And I'm like, there's no trophy for that. You don't get money for that. There's nothing for mile an hour, but it sounds so cool. If you get there in 6.7 seconds, which we did, and everybody else was getting there in 6.75 seconds. We got there in 6.73 seconds. That's what wins the race, not the mile an hour. So,
well, that's just so hard for the normal person to comprehend how fast you're going, though, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of miles per hour or what your time is, like, just to be on 2 wheels going that fast just is absolutely mind blowing, right? It's so hard to fathom.
The G-force. Now, y'all, Again, I'll ask you to put on your visualization skills. So, we have a motorcycle, there's a Top Fuel car, there's a racing car, even NASCAR, World of Outlaws, even your car driving down the street. A lot of the information can be based off a G meter, and you can buy those things. And I remember sticking them to your windshield. Now they have them built into the new cars, Corvettes and the Demons and things like that. But all of that stuff, all of that data, not stuff, all that data, now we can have a data monitoring system, and it goes on the motorcycle or in the car, and it monitors everything that happened. And then you download it, and then you look at it, and then you make changes. So now I'm going to ask you to put on your visualization skills and just say you're sitting at your screen, you've made a run, and now you're looking at the screen, and up comes this software. Well, what it shows is it shows a line, and it's little dots, and it's at 0, and it's a G meter, and then it goes up to 5. Well, when we pop the clutch, the G meter goes up to 3. And like a Top Fuel car, funny car, pro stock car, it'll go 3, 4. A fuel car will get up to 5 going down the track. It's accelerating so hard. So now visualize that. So it goes straight up in the first tenth of a second, goes straight up to 3 Gs, and then it starts curving over, and it starts going down 2.7, 2.5, 2.3. Well, all of this is going on in 1 second. You're going 0 to 60 in 1 second. Front wheels in the air, going about 60 miles an hour. And as you visualize all this stuff, and your seat belts are already holding you in there against the back of the seat, there's no seat belts on a motorcycle. There's no backrest. So hanging on while you're leaving with 3 Gs is a very important aspect of it. So the 200 miles an hour at the finish line, there's a 0.3 Gs, 0.4 Gs. The fuel cars have got 10 times that, but
Oh my!
it's still really, really exciting to go 200 miles an hour in a quarter of a mile, and then slowing down as people stop looking. But that's always exciting too.
Is that hand strength? I mean, is that it, like, to be able to keep yourself on the bike? Is it hand strength, or is it just that your posture on the bike? Like, how do you stay on?
Yeah, it's a great question. You do it. You have to be with the motorcycle, so you're hanging on with your legs. You have to leave with the motorcycle. So if you're just hanging on, it would be very, very difficult to control the bike. So we control it when the front wheel's in the air. You can't steer the bike with the handlebars because obviously the front wheel's not on the ground. So if it's going to the left, you push on the right foot peg. You can get out and you can lean. You're if you don't have a screen right now, and you're again, you got to visualize me. I'm hanging off the side of the chair I'm sitting on. That's a definite way to do that, but it's a horrible way to try to win the race. Plus, the more you lean to one side, the more the tire gets crushed, and it tries to keep pushing you the other way. So you really want to push with your foot peg, and that's how you steer with the front wheel in the air. But your body, you have to be part of the motorcycle. So you're really hanging on with your mind. You're hanging on with your legs. And believe it or not, you're hanging on a little bit with your torso and your butt. And I don't know.
I'd imagine you can't think about anything else at that point, right? Like you're just thinking about that, because there's you can't let your mind wander at all.
Yeah, you really need to be, that's where the dirt bike experience helps. And I always try to encourage people to, when they struggle, it's so difficult. In 6.5 seconds, we have to push the button to shift, and it's pneumatically shifting. So when the shift light comes on at about 13,000 RPM, you push the button, and it pneumatically puts air to a ram, and then the ram moves the foot lever that you would normally think of as the way to shift. It moves that ram really fast, and it's in 2 gears at one time. And then when the higher gear overspeeds the gear before it, the gear before it ratchets backwards and comes out of gear. And that way you don't need to roll off the throttle. You don't need to kill. You don't need to speed shift. And when you shift, it's so fast that the accelerometer on the G meter, it actually spikes in the gear change as opposed to decelerating in the gear change. So that's another story on how that transmission works. But it's you have to do that 5 times in a quarter of a mile. And as soon as the light comes on, and it's revving so fast that if you're late, it'll go on the rev limiter. And if you're early, you'll steal the power. So it's a very, very precise thing. I consider it one of the hardest things to man and to get down the track properly in all of NHRA. I might get beat up for that, but they're very difficult because the rider is such a function of being on that package, that vehicle going down the track where everybody else is strapped in there. The motorcycle person is on there, and that's and being on it at the finish line is an important part.
It's just an incredible thing, and I give you so much credit for doing it as long as you have. Now, one of the things you talked about earlier is that it's given you a platform to be able to share what you're doing with the Batman Scholarship, and I want to take some time to talk about that because I think what you're doing is amazing, and really it's an impactful thing, right? It's an impactful thing for our industry, and I just am such a huge fan of everything that you're doing there. So walk us through that a little bit. What is the Batman Scholarship? And I once we talk about what it is, I do want to talk about why you got into that part in general, right? And really what led you to want to do that. So if you'd start with like what the Batman Scholarship is, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, the Batman Scholarship is a little bit of an acronym. It's Be a Technician, and it's for man or woman. We just kind of hose in on a little bit of the Batman fame, just to try to catch young people's ears and eyes. I started throughout this journey when I was working on this scholarship. I used to give $500 cash. I didn't have a name for it, and some of the kids are like, 500. I was like, oh, man. So as today's kids, right? So
I guess, yes.
Yeah, the Batman Scholarship, again, Be a Technician. It stems from myself. I was a factory trained Jaguar technician when I was racing that motorcycle on the street and even professionally. Before I transitioned full time into my motorcycle career, I was an automotive technician, and so I worked on Jaguars. I got to go to factory school. V12s are exciting. Oh my gosh, they're so fascinating. I have an XKE that's just sitting, and I love it, but I just don't have any time to do with it. But then I worked on Rolls Royce. I have a mentor, and if there was a couple of things I wanted young people to ever hear from me and remember, it's how important a mentor is in your life. The biggest companies in the world have advisory committees. We as an individual, I don't know if you need an advisory committee, although it wouldn't be bad. But having one mentor is an incredible thing. I'm still in touch with my mentor for 50 years, I guess, 40 years, Sam Laronis. So it's so important. But he took me to work on Rolls Royce after Jaguars. And so I worked on Rolls Royce and then Corvettes. So in other words, I'm a technician. So I don't just talk about it. I was one, and I also painted cars. So all of that, we engage hopefully people in the career path of being a body technician or an automotive technician on the mechanical side. And it was our way to get young people to keep that fire, keep that excitement going. And when they go on our website, it's only six questions. So SEMA does an incredible one. Automotivescholarships.com. There's opportunities in everybody's life. You don't have to be a kid. In yours life, my life, everybody's life. The problem is people recognize them when they're gone, when they've gone by already. So we try to promote it with positions like what you guys are doing and ASE. So we take that scholarship and we try to plaster it out to everybody and let them know. 6 questions. Tell me why you're a rock star, why you're going to be in this industry. And then we take the best ones of the classes, and it just keeps going. We never stop, go across the United States. And we say, hey, send us a 60-second video of who you are and what's your brand and why you think you should be the winner. So now we don't just get this piece of paper. Now we get a chance to see them, and gives us just a little bit more, and you learn a lot from that. So we pick a winner, we go to the school, and we talk to the school about marketing your brand after the diploma. So I guess if you take, I use Nicki Minaj and Taylor Swift. They're two girls, got lots of money, have huge singing careers, very famous, but two totally different brands, right? Well, I tell the young people, marketing your brand after the diploma is how you ace the interview process. And when you walk in the door, bam, you are a brand. Were you there early? Are you dressed right? Did you have a tic tac? Blah, blah, blah. And back in school, when the girl walked in, everybody looked at the girl and, is she on the cheerleading? Is she rich or is she smart? And the same with the guys. Is he on the football team? Is he smart? Has he got a cool car? All these things are part of our brand. So I talk to the students about that. And it's very engaging. I make it very engaging because I ask them the questions. I ask them to tell me about their friends. So I let the students really drive that. But when we're done, I said, hey, you remember when your teacher talked to you about this scholarship? Did any of you fill it out? And some raised their hands, some didn't. And when the ones that didn't, I'm like, oh, this is cool. Well, the ones that did, I recognize them. And then we say, hey, somebody in this classroom won our scholarship. And they're all like, wow, wow, wow. And the next thing you know, we drag them up there and man, it's we unveil about $5,000 in Snap-on tools. There's a really cool roll cart, impact guns, and wrenches and screwdrivers and pliers and a snap ring, all kinds of stuff, So even Snap-on, there's a lot of stuff there. And then Peak, our partners at Peak, Antifreeze and Def, Blue Def, and Old World Industries. They are very. Tom Hervis, his dad was an automotive technician and ran a shop, and he's very passionate about this. So Brian Bolander loves what we do, and he gives this student $1,500 more to spend on tools. So it's the kids are flipping out, especially the one, and we try to do a couple of them. But the ones that the real takeaway there for the students that didn't do it is like, there was an opportunity and you didn't do anything. And it was 6 questions. So I could do a whole podcast on, you can imagine the 6 questions. Even when you say, tell me about your brand, I'm a hard worker and I get up every morning and I love the industry. Well, that's what everybody does. So the winners win because they elaborate on that. So that's the Batman Scholarship. The biggest thing that I'd like to say is it's 6 questions. You go on our website and it's stevejohnsonracing.com and go to scholarships. And there's a video that you can watch. It's got a big Snap-on toolbox in the video. And I talk about my love for being a technician. And we're trying to find real players. We're trying to find somebody that's going to be in the industry for a long time. And that's why we do a little bit of the peeling back the onion to see if the student's really engaged in what he's talking about. Or at Wyotech, I was cheating a little bit. I was trying to remember her name. At Wyotech, I'm cheating a little. Uridia just won in Indianapolis, and we did it on the starting line at the U.S. Nationals.
On live TV too, wasn't it? It was on national TV.
It was on TV. Yeah, it wasn't live, but it was on TV. Jillian won at Wyotech and Ledge at Lawson State. I'm cheating now, y'all. So, there was a guy, Brody, also won at Wyotech, and Caden and Alan Mendez at Dubisky, and just Jake. There's so, it's so rewarding to be able to hand this over to these students and to be able to use NHRA's platform as kind of the kickoff. But these instructors are such rock stars these days. And my presentation is not about just presenting the award. It really is about our industry, and it's really trying to get the students, guy or girl, to understand that they're a personal brand, and how can they get their brand to be what they want it to be. And it's usually pretty easy to do when you think about it.
Well, that's so cool because you're using your experience of what you went through in your life to get to where you're at, to educate these young folks to understand that even starting out as an entry level technician, you are creating a brand, and you are creating something that you want to have that magnetic pull, right? You want people to want you, and I think the more you do get in, you get that technical skill. You really view yourself as a professional, and not just, we always talk about the grease monkey mentality that was years back, where uh, maybe it wasn't perceived as a professional type of position, but now it's seen differently, I think, even from the outside public. But having somebody like you to be able to talk about that in such a public setting, and really shine a light on these really talented young people, and then help them with this scholarship. Tools a lot of times are one of the big barriers to entry in our industry. If you have to come in and spend, you know 10 grand on tools right off the bat, you're fighting out of a hole right from the start. You're helping combat that, and I just think that's the coolest thing. And it's not like it's cheapo tools, right? These are they're really, really good tools. And I just think that's such a cool program, and I really hope that just continues to grow because it does have such an impact, and I think it's so needed in our industry. And somebody like you with a an ability to not only speak in front of a camera but speak very intelligently, and have that enthusiasm just kind of vibing off of you, it just resonates with young people. And the fact that you understand that you're trying to meet these young people where they're at, and what's going on in their world, is exactly what our industry needs. It is so cool to see.
Well, I appreciate that, and hence all of this, hence the word wrenchway. it's it's like this is the tools. The barrier to industry are the tools for sure, and these are snap on. The brand is number one, but there are lots of tools. In all fairness, there's lots of tools out there, but you show up early and you show up with a smile. You convince them that you want to learn. You're going to have a home, and you just can't outsource being a technician. So there are so many advantages. I talk to them really about interviews suck, man. That's not right. But interviews are not the greatest thing to do. All right. So, I try to engage them into saying, find the job that you want and prepare. You win races by preparing at the shop. Sure, you have to race at the racetrack, but you can't be working on your stuff trying to reinvent things at the racetrack. You prepare. So you prepare for your interview, and you prepare with all the things. You do a little research and check out, find out that the company there has an initiative that they do charity work, or they race a red Corvette, or they travel, whatever it is, and engage in that part of it in the interview. Make sure that you ask a couple of questions in the interview, and just be professional, and practice it. If you practice it one time, I always tell the students, if you hold the phone in front of you and you ask yourself, what is your name? And tell me what your passion is. And you say it, and then you watch it. You'll see how bad you are. But you will be so much better when you see how bad you are, because you'll know how to fix it. And that helps your brand. And those are the things we want. We want rock stars to come into the industry. George Ahrens and I, George Ahrens is with the ASE Education Foundation, and he is just so known by everybody. And he's the guiding light. He's the puppet master. He's really got his pulse on what's going on. There's really not a technician shortage. It's a shortage of qualified applicants is what is ultimately, I think, is what he says. Because you look at all these schools that are teaching, and you got more students graduating than I believe than the
need. Yeah.
Business. The federal government does a study, and they tell you there's a 6-digit number that goes to every single trade in the United States. So for an automotive technician, they say these are the amount of technicians that are going to be needed in the next 10 years. And this is the 4-year span. And the amount of students that are graduating from automotive schools is so much more. So we have to engage these young people into thinking, into letting them know the value and the fun and how you can raise a family and be happy in the automotive space, both with body and the repair on engine. But the fun that you can get out of conveying that in a school, 400 students out there, and I'm bouncing around and I'm throwing tennis balls, because when you get a question right, I throw them a tennis ball and they get to bring the tennis ball up at the end of the show for a prize, So handing out those tools is really special. We give them a plaque. It's branded, because we encourage them to put the plaque on the toolbox, because we want them to know where their first tools came from. So, I'm very, very proud of that. But the sponsors that I have, Wings and Warriors, a buddy of mine, Rusty West, is been an automotive guy all his life. He's very, very successful in that industry. And Peak, those guys are great. Snap-on's been a great supporter. So you got to have partners, you got to have friends. And I'll leave you with this: the students that win, they you gotta give me a break here. But I believe, because I'm trying to promote mentorship, I give them my cell number. And I said, if you guys need anything, sure, you're going to get the tools and you're going to be happy and stuff. But, maybe you're going to want to know a question about a motorcycle, or maybe you're going to want free tickets, or maybe you're going to want to ask a question about this branding and how to convey a better brand about yourself. They have my phone number, so they can call me or text.
Incredible.
So our program is really a big span. Yes, we give the tools away, but we really try to encourage everybody that touches it in any way, shape, or form a real value. And that's what's really fun. Is we don't ever say, if we could just reach one kid. I don't ever say that. If there's 400 students in there, I want to reach 400 students.
It's so cool, and it's so true. And I'll share a quick story of mine that I think you'll get a kick out of, which was I grew up in a small independent shop up here in Wisconsin. And when I was probably 9 or 10 years old, the tool truck guys would come each week, and I had one tool vendor who was he was a Mac Tools distributor, and he would come each week to the shop, and he was always just really nice to me, right? And so I would go on his truck, and I had done various chores around the shop, taking out garbage and washing floors and whatever it might be, to earn a little money, because I wanted to get this hat, this Mac Tools hat, and it was a Dale Earnhardt hat. And so I get this Dale Earnhardt hat, and I probably more so because I thought it looked cool than anything else. But I get this hat, and I got so much crap from all of my dad's buddies about getting a Dale Earnhardt hat that the next week the guy came back. I'm like, I can't have this hat anymore. I'm just getting torn apart out here.
Wow.
And so he let me trade in my hat for an Ernie Irvan hat. So it was a swap, and then I just became an Ernie Irvan fan forever. But the power of branding in that scenario too, of getting more people into the industry and getting interest in things that are mechanical, stemmed for me from being able to go on the tool truck when I was a kid and thinking, hey, oh my goodness, this is really, really cool. It was like that was like the coolest thing to me. But it was always funny that, like, going back, my interest in racing probably was stemmed from that, right? Like from a simple hat, and just getting so much of a hard time from my dad's buddies because I bought an Earnhardt hat.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, because with Snap-on, obviously Dale Earnhardt was with Snap-on, so I got to do stuff with Dale. We went to the Bahamas once, and with Richard Childress and Doug Herbert and Mike Skinner, and just I got back in the early days with TNN. I did stuff with with Bill Elliott and Morgan Shepherd and
oh my goodness,
Junior Johnson was he wasn't racing then, but it just it was horrible. But the oh gosh, Doug Doug
Yates?
Yates's dad. I can't even
Robert.
remember. Robert Yates, yeah, hang out with Jack Roush, talking to me. I said, how do you know to hire that guy? He says, you can always see in their eyes. I mean, Jack Roush gave me advice. We cooked steaks at Richard Childress's house, and had dinner and hung out in his wine cellar. And, I gave him a couple of my die cast, and just amazing things, that racing has been able to provide me. But the Dale Earnhardt thing's so funny because he was, arguably the second most recognizable human in the United States for a long time. So, to do stuff with, he would bust my chops so bad, but he was very, very, I sat next to him for autograph parties and I got ideas about diecast and, he was fine about answering questions. He was fine about being there with autograph party. But when the line stopped, because all the Snap-on dealers knew me, he didn't like that at all. And he told me, do not, I'm sitting right next to Dale Earnhardt. He says, do not slow down this line. They come by, you sign it, let them go. Do not slow down the line. And he told me twice. And he says, I ain't going to tell you again, because I was friends. I was friends with all these guys. Sure, they were all there to see Dale, but I was there and they knew me. So, hey, Steve, da, 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 and oh man, I got scolded by Dale Sr. So, but I'm very, very fortunate. I got to jump out of an airplane with the Golden Knights. How cool is that, right? So, being involved with the Army, I always went to all the Army venues at the NHRA races when they were sponsors there for many, many years with Tony Schumacher. Build the relationships with Kevin Schwabo and then jump out of an airplane with the Golden Knights, so just so blessed to do so many fun things, but it all revolved around. Here's where I think it is. And I learned this a little bit from Tony Robbins, I think, is you have to have energy. The most successful person, Elon Musk, if you're an Elon Musk guy, he has energy. If you think back, all the kids in schools, the ones that were blobs, even if you're the smartest person in the world, you still have to get up and punch a time clock or something like that. You have to have energy, and that's part of the brand. And the more energy that you have, I think the more that it gets your brain in a part to where you can have the physiology of, wow, I think they know something, or wow, I think I can learn that, or wow, I want to do that. Those are things you got to have to. You can watch lots of reels on Instagram and get all kinds of advice. So now you're getting it right here from Jay and Steve Johnson.
Right from the source.
You got to have energy, y'all. You just got to have energy. So, and Tony Robbins said that, and he's a successful guy. So, I think it's value. And I know when I go in to do my presentations, they know I got some energy because I'm bouncing around pretty good.
Oh, if anybody's ever watched an interview with Steve on TV or any of the social media side, I follow your Facebook page as well. There's just it radiates off of you, and I think that's why we're so lucky to have you not only on this podcast today, but being a really integral piece of growing this industry and everything that you're doing out there. I'm such a huge fan, and I just really hope to see you keep growing this thing and keep having the impact that you do, because it is such a cool thing from an outside perspective to see what you're doing, and it couldn't be more happy to have you on the show. I think we probably could have gone for dozens of hours here, I think, in just talking through everything because of your energy. It's an easy interview, so that makes life way easier.
Well,
here we go. Here we got a trophy.
I know you guys do clips. So WrenchWay does a fantastic podcast. You never know who's going to be on there, but Steve Johnson's on there. But look, Wally's on there, and it comes from the National Hot Rod Association. People race their entire life and never get a Wally. And I've been fortunate enough to win a few of them. So if you really get excited about listening to something about the automotive industry, I can engage you and promise you that if you listen to Jay at WrenchWay, you will not only get to meet Wally, but you'll meet Steve Johnson and the Batman Scholarship, along with all kinds of exciting things for the automotive industry. And that's my words.
I appreciate you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on the podcast and hope we do it again.
Yes. Thanks so much, Jay.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.